How did a single message meant for someone else expose the real power behind my marriage? And why did everyone involved assume I would fold without resistance? I saw the words light up on my wife's phone during a family dinner, smiled like I hadn't read them, and finished my meal calmly. They thought I was cornered. In reality, they had just stepped into a system I understood better than any of them. Before we continue, we ask you to hit the hype button, subscribe, and like the video to help the channel grow. Tell us which city you are from in the comments. We would like to get to know our audience better. The phone screen glowed next to Hazel's water glass. Just a preview notification, 3 lines visible before the screen went dark again. Most people would have missed it. I was cutting into my steak, mid-conversation with Nina about her upcoming chemistry exam, when the words registered in my peripheral vision. Tonight we corner him. He'll agree without questions. The sender name was truncated. K-Ho. Kara. My sister-in-law. I took another bite. The meat was cooked perfectly, medium rare with a slight char. Hazel laughed at something Nina said, reaching for her phone casually, turning it face down without checking it. The movement was practiced, natural. How many times had she done that recently? Dad, are you even listening? Nina's voice pulled me back. Oxidation states, I said. You were explaining why manganese is tricky. She blinked, surprised I'd retained that much. Yeah, exactly. Hazel watched me over the rim of her wine glass. Her expression was pleasant, engaged, the same face she'd worn for 20 years of dinners, but something flickered behind her eyes when I met her gaze. Orion, could you pass the salt? She asked. I handed it across. Our fingers didn't touch. The rest of dinner proceeded normally. Nina talked about her lab partner. Hazel mentioned a charity event at her mother's house next weekend. I asked about the caterer, made appropriate supportive noises, helped clear the plates. In the kitchen, loading the dishwasher, Hazel stood close enough that I could smell her perfume, the expensive one Kara had bought her for Christmas. You seem distracted tonight, she said. Long day at the yard. Fletcher Transport changed their renewal terms again? She rinsed a glass, not looking at me. Kara mentioned she might stop by tomorrow. That okay? Your sister's always welcome. The lie sat comfortably between us. Hazel smiled, kissed my cheek, and went upstairs. I finished the dishes, wiped down the counters. When I passed through the dining room, Hazel's phone was gone from the table. Later, alone in my home office, I opened the fleet operations schedule for the next morning. 47 vehicles across 3 client contracts, the kind of work that kept a business running but never made headlines. My phone sat beside the keyboard. The screenshot I'd taken of Hazel's notification was buried in a password-protected folder labeled Tax Documents 2019. Nobody ever opened old tax folders. I studied the message again. Tonight we corner him. Not tomorrow, not next week. Tonight. I waited. Around 11, I heard footsteps on the stairs. 2 sets. Hazel's lighter tread and heavier steps behind her. Kara hadn't mentioned she was coming over tonight. I closed the fleet schedule, opened a vendor invoice, and turned my chair toward the door. The knock was perfunctory. Kara walked in before I could respond. Orion, still working? She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Everything about Kara was calculated for impact. The designer blazer, the statement jewelry, the way she occupied space like she owned it. Hazel slipped in behind her, closing the door. Just finishing up. I gestured to the screen. Fuel contract renewals. Riveting, Kara said. She settled into the leather chair across from my desk like she was conducting an interview. Hazel leaned against the bookshelf, arms crossed. The positioning was deliberate. They'd planned this. We wanted to talk about the fleet business, Kara began. Specifically about expansion opportunities. Hazel and I have been reviewing the operations. There's significant unrealized potential. You've built something functional, Orion, but it's time to think bigger. Bigger how? Kara leaned forward. Property development. The main yard sits on prime commercial land. With the right partnerships, we could leverage that asset for serious returns. I've already had preliminary conversations with some developers. The numbers are compelling. The yard is operational space. We need it for the fleet. Which is exactly the limited thinking that's kept this business plateaued for 5 years. Her tone was patient, like she was explaining something obvious to a slow student. You manage operations beautifully, Orion. Nobody's questioning your competence in logistics, but vision, strategy, that requires a different skill set. Hazel shifted against the bookshelf. Kara's just trying to help us maximize what we have. I appreciate that, I said, but any major changes need careful consideration. Client relationships, vendor contracts, operational continuity. Which is why we'd handle the transition smoothly, Kara interrupted. You'd continue managing the day-to-day operations. We'd bring in strategic oversight. Think of it as evolution, not disruption. Strategic oversight. That meant control, decision-making authority. I'd want to review any proposal in detail, I said carefully. Run it past our legal advisor. Kara's smile tightened. Of course. But time is a factor. The development interest won't wait indefinitely. How much time? Days, not weeks. These opportunities move fast. She stood. Just think about it, Orion. Really think about what's best for everyone, including Nina's future. The mention of my daughter was deliberate. They were setting stakes. I'll consider it, I said. After they left, I stayed in the office another hour. Through the window, Kara's silver sedan was still beside Hazel's. They were likely upstairs now, debriefing, dissecting my reactions, recalibrating. I opened my email and wrote to Martin Ryle, the attorney who'd structured the fleet contracts 6 years earlier. Subject: question about operational agreements. Body: would you have time this week to review some documentation? Nothing urgent, just want to confirm I understand the current structures. Sent at 11:47 p.m. Calm, routine. Then I added a note to my calendar. Fletcher Transport. Confirm renewal terms in person. The screenshot stayed in its hidden folder. Evidence preserved. Downstairs, the front door closed. Kara's engine started, headlights briefly washing across the office wall. Hazel moved through the house, locking doors, turning off lights, the habits of someone confident everything was on track. I shut down the computer and went to bed. The Fletcher Transport Yard opened at 6. I arrived at 5:30, the morning air cold enough to fog my breath, the sky still dark except for a thin orange line on the horizon. Dennis, the gate guard, waved me through. Early start, Mr. Vanton. Inspection day. I parked near the maintenance bay and walked the yard with a clipboard, checking tires, fluid levels, body damage, registration stickers. Quiet, methodical work. The kind that required focus and produced no drama. By 7, the day shift arrived. Drivers collected keys, reviewed route sheets, ran their own checks. Most had been with Fletcher for years. They knew me, trusted me. Truck 17's pulling left again, one driver said. Same as last month. Alignment or brakes? Feels like brakes. I'll get it in the bay this afternoon. Take 23. Simple exchange. Problem identified, solution applied. This was what I did. Not vision, not ambition, just keeping things running. Around 9, my phone buzzed. A text from Hazel. Kara wants to have lunch today. Can you make it? They wanted to move faster. I replied, at Fletcher all day. Maybe dinner later this week? The typing dots appeared, vanished, appeared again. Finally, okay. The resistance surprised her. I was usually flexible about family time. At 10:15, Martin Ryle called. I can see you Thursday at 3. I want to review our operational structure, I said. Who controls what if the business model changes? Changes? His tone sharpened. Hypothetical. Expansion ideas. Understood. Bring the documentation. After the call, I opened the original contracts. I'd read them many times, but now certain clauses stood out. Primary operational authority vests in Fleet Operations Manager. Service continuity transfers with operational management, not property location. My signature appeared on every page. Hazel's name didn't appear at all. Around noon, I stopped at a diner. Coffee, a sandwich, 2 missed calls from Kara. No voicemail. Pressure without explanation. I finished my coffee and returned to the yard. Truck 17 needed brake work. That took priority. That evening, I came home late. Nina was already in her room. Hazel sat in the living room, laptop open, wine on the table. Long day? She asked. Maintenance issues. Kara tried calling. I was busy. She closed the laptop. We're trying to do something good for the family, Orion. You're acting like we're attacking you. I said I'd consider it. That requires time. You don't need legal reviews to see opportunity. I always review major changes carefully. Stable isn't ambitious. Kara's phrasing. They'd discussed this. Ambition without foundation is risk, I said, and caution without vision is stagnation. I'm listening. That doesn't mean agreeing. Her jaw tightened. You can't stand the idea that someone else saw possibilities you missed. The comment was meant to provoke. I didn't react. Or maybe I understand the risks better than you think. I went upstairs. In my office, I opened the hidden folder. The screenshot glowed. Tonight, we corner him. He'll agree without questions. They'd tried. I hadn't. I pulled up the real financial records. Operational accounts Hazel had never seen, vendor contracts, lease structures, the machinery behind the deposits she trusted me to manage. That trust was now being used against me. Near midnight, Hazel came upstairs and closed her bedroom door. We'd been sleeping separately for months. I stayed up, writing notes, no emotion, just facts, authority lines, control points. Thursday would confirm the legal framework, but I already knew the truth. They thought ownership meant control. They were wrong. The real question was how much damage they'd cause before they realized resistance was already in motion. The shift happened gradually, then all at once. Looking back, I could pinpoint the moment Hazel stopped seeing me as a partner and started seeing me as an obstacle. It was 3 years ago, at her mother's house, during a family dinner that stretched into the evening. Kara had just closed her second property deal, a commercial renovation that doubled in value in under 2 years. She was riding high, talking about leverage, timing, opportunity costs. Evan nodded along, the supportive partner. Hazel watched her sister with something between admiration and envy. "You make it look effortless," Hazel said. "It's instinct," Kara replied, topping off her wine. "Once you see the pattern, you see it everywhere. Properties, businesses, relationships, it's all the same. Find the undervalued asset, apply capital and vision, extract maximum return." I was helping Hazel's mother clear dessert plates. Her father had passed years earlier, leaving the house but little else. She lived carefully, aware of fixed income limits. "Orion runs a solid operation," she said, defending me without realizing it. "Steady clients, stable income." "Solid is fine," Kara said, "for some people. But Hazel could have more, should have more. Stability and growth aren't the same goal." No one challenged it. I loaded the dishwasher while the conversation shifted to safer topics. On the drive home, Hazel was quiet, not peaceful, thinking. "Do you ever feel like we're playing it too safe?" she asked. "Safe how?" "The business, our life, everything's just steady." "Steady gives Nina consistency. It lets us plan." "But plan for what? The same thing 20 years from now?" "Would that be so bad?" She didn't answer. After that, things changed. Slowly. Kara visited more often. Hazel started attending seminars, reading books about entrepreneurship and wealth. She questioned decisions I'd made for years, our conservative savings, modest car, my reluctance to use debt for expansion. "You think like an employee, not an owner," she said once. "I think like someone who's seen businesses collapse. Or maybe you're just scared of success." The message became clear. I was holding us back. I noticed conversations stopping when I entered rooms. Hazel taking calls in the car. Kara's questions growing sharper. How much land the yard occupied, zoning status, liens, encumbrances. She was evaluating. 6 months ago, Hazel suggested Kara take temporary oversight of business development. "You'd still handle operations," she said. "She just explores growth options." "What options?" "We're sustainable." Sustainable isn't thriving. It also isn't collapsing. Flipping property isn't running operations. "So you don't trust her?" "I don't trust any proposal I haven't seen in writing." The proposal never came. Just conversations, pressure through family dynamics. 3 months ago, I overheard something that clarified everything. I'd gone to the yard late to retrieve a file. The office should have been empty, but voices carried from the break room, Kara's unmistakable. "The land alone is worth triple what he thinks. The business is overhead we eliminate after redevelopment. Clients relocate, vendors change. But that location? Prime corridor. Developers are ready." Evan's voice followed. "What about Orion?" "What about him? He'll get a fair settlement. He's not unreasonable, just unambitious. Once Hazel makes it clear this happens with or without him, he'll fold. Men like that always do when they're alone." "And if he doesn't?" "We move forward anyway. Hazel's on the registration. We have standing. He can object from the sidelines." I stood outside, file in hand, listening as they dismantled my life like a transaction. Clinical, strategic, unconcerned with my agency. Men like that always fold. I drove home and started making calls. First to Martin Ryle, then to key clients, routine check-ins, then to the property management firm, confirming lease terms, renewals, authorization protocols. I didn't confront Hazel. I didn't argue. I kept operations normal while quietly mapping what I actually controlled versus what they assumed I did. The gap was larger than they realized. Now, sitting in my home office at 2 a.m, I could trace the entire arc. Kara's influence, Hazel's shifting loyalty, the gradual erosion of respect that happened so slowly I'd almost missed it. Almost. Operational, not visionary, Kara had said at that family dinner 3 years ago. She meant it as dismissal. I was beginning to see it as armor. Vision required belief, confidence, the assumption that your perspective was superior. Operations required precision, documentation, attention to the specific mechanisms that made things function. They had vision, I had systems. We'd see which one mattered when the test came. Thursday afternoon arrived cold and gray. I drove to Martin Ryle's office through light rain, the kind that made visibility difficult without quite justifying urgency. His building was downtown, 3rd floor, shared space with an accounting firm and a title company. Professional, but not flashy. Martin met me in the lobby himself. 52, lean, with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. We'd worked together on the initial fleet contracts, and he'd structured them with the kind of careful precision that proved he understood both law and reality. Orion, good to see you. His handshake was firm. Let's use conference room B. More privacy. The conference room had a long table, whiteboard, and windows overlooking the street. Martin closed the door and gestured to a chair. So, hypothetical changes. Want to tell me what's actually happening? I appreciated the directness. I laid out the situation cleanly, Kara's development interest, Hazel's alignment, the pressure to transfer oversight, the timetable they'd imposed. Martin listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. And your question is whether they can force this transition. My question is what authority I actually have versus what they think I have. Smart question. He pulled a legal pad toward him. Let's start with ownership structure. The business registration lists Hazel as primary owner, correct? Correct. But you're listed as Fleet Operations Manager. That's not a courtesy title. It's a legal designation. When we structured these contracts 6 years ago, I specifically used that language because your clients wanted operational continuity guarantees. They didn't want their service dependent on ownership disputes or internal company politics. He flipped through a folder he'd brought. Here's the Fletcher contract. Clause 7. Service obligations and operational authority vest with designated Fleet Operations Manager. Contract performance is tied to operational continuity, not ownership structure. See that language? It means Fletcher's contract is with you functionally, even if they're paying the company. So if ownership changes, the contract doesn't automatically transfer. Fletcher would need to consent to new operational management. And if they don't consent, they can invoke continuity provisions and follow the operational manager, meaning you, if you establish independent operation elsewhere. I felt something unlock in my chest. All the client contracts have similar language? Every single one. It was standard protection. Your clients are logistics companies, freight haulers, delivery services. They can't afford disruption, so we made sure disruption required their explicit approval. Martin pulled out another document. Now let's talk about the property. The main yard is leased, not owned. Lease agreement is in the company name, but authorization to execute lease terms, including renewals, modifications, or termination, requires signature from the Fleet Operations Manager. That's you. Why that structure? Because the landlord wanted operational stability. They didn't want ownership disputes affecting rent payments or property maintenance, so operational authority got built into the lease execution. Can't change the lease terms without your signature. He pulled out a third document. Vendor contracts, maintenance suppliers, fuel distributors, parts warehouses. Same pattern. Service agreements are tied to operational approval, not ownership decision-making. They want to know the person managing operations is the person authorizing payments and maintaining relationships. I studied the documents. 6 years ago, I'd reviewed these briefly, trusted Martin's expertise, and signed where indicated. I hadn't realized he'd built a fortress around operational authority while making it look like routine contract language. Why did you structure it this way? I asked. Because I've seen businesses torn apart by internal disputes, seen competent operators squeezed out by owners who thought control meant competence. The clients didn't want that risk, the vendors didn't want that risk, and frankly, you seemed like someone who'd be doing the actual work while someone else took credit. I protected the work. He said it matter-of-factly, without drama, just professional assessment. So if Hazel and Kara try to transition operational oversight, they can't, not without your cooperation. They can make noise, file paperwork, announce intentions, but the clients can invoke continuity provisions, the vendors can refuse to work with new management, and the property lease can't be modified without your authorization. They'd be left with ownership of an empty structure while you walk away with the actual business relationships. Would that hold up legally? Already does. These are executed contracts. They'd need to challenge them in court, prove the language is invalid, convince clients to testify against their own interests. It would be expensive, time-consuming, and they'd probably lose. Most importantly, clients hate uncertainty. The moment Hazel and Kara create legal chaos, clients start looking for stable alternatives, which would be you. I let that settle. So, what's my move? Depends what you want. If you want to fight for the current structure, you have leverage. If you want to exit and rebuild independently, you have that option. If you want them to understand they don't have the power they think they have, he smiled slightly. That would require demonstration, not declaration. Meaning you let them make their move publicly, then show everyone why it won't work. But that's dramatic, risky. You'd be burning bridges. The bridges are already burned, I said quietly. They just don't know it yet. Martin nodded. Then you need to decide how public you want the lesson to be. We spent another hour reviewing specific documents. He walked me through enforcement mechanisms, client notification protocols, vendor relationship documentation. By the time I left his office, I had a folder of contracts and a clear understanding of the architecture. That evening, I stopped at the bank. Our primary business account was joint with Hazel, but the operational accounts, payroll, vendors, contract receipts, required dual authorization for any changes. I confirmed the protocols with the branch manager, verified notification procedures, and requested written confirmation. Just standard verification, I said, making sure everything's documented. She complied without question. At home, Hazel was in the kitchen with Kara. Their conversation stopped when I walked in. There you are, Kara said. We've been trying to reach you. Had business to handle. What kind of business? Operational reviews, contract checks, routine. I took a bottle of water from the fridge. How was your day? The deflection irritated her. Kara preferred confrontation. My refusal to engage on her terms disrupted her rhythm. We need a proper meeting, she said. All of us. Evan included. These half-conversations aren't working. Sure, when? Tomorrow night? Dinner? I've got client calls. Maybe next week? Orion, Hazel said sharply. We need to resolve this. I agree, but resolution requires consideration, not urgency. I looked at Kara. You said the development interest was time-sensitive. How much time? Days. Maybe a week. Then we should be thorough. I'll review everything this weekend and prepare questions. We meet Monday evening. That gives me time to understand the proposal, and you time to formalize it. Reasonable, calm, difficult to oppose without exposing impatience. Kara's jaw tightened. Fine. Monday. But this delay tactic needs to stop. It's not a tactic. It's due diligence. I went upstairs before it escalated. In my office, I made a list. Clients to contact, vendors to alert, documents to organize. The framework was clear now. They thought ownership was leverage. I knew execution was control. Monday would be interesting. Saturday morning, Nina found me in the garage sorting through old files. She leaned against the doorframe, wearing pajamas and a skeptical expression. You're doing weekend work, she observed. Just organizing. You never organize on weekends. Smart kid. Too smart sometimes. Special circumstances. She came in, picked up a folder labeled Fletcher Contract Renewals, flipped through it without really reading. People at school keep asking me what you do. I tell them you manage a vehicle fleet and they look confused, like that's not a real job. It's a real job. I know, but it's not impressive, like nobody's excited about logistics. She put the folder down. Aunt Kara runs businesses. Mom talks about strategic planning. You just keep trucks running. People think that's boring. Do you think it's boring? She considered. I think it's necessary. Boring and necessary aren't the same thing. Your chemistry teacher is necessary. Is she boring? Mrs. Patterson? She's actually interesting. She makes elements sound like they have personalities. Fleet management is the same. Vehicles have personalities. Drivers have rhythms. Clients have patterns. It's only boring if you're not paying attention. Nina sat on a storage crate. Why are you really organizing files on Saturday? I could lie, redirect, change the subject. But Nina was 16, observant, and tired of being treated like she couldn't handle complexity. Your mother and aunt want to make some changes to the business, I said. I'm making sure I understand exactly how things are currently structured before discussing those changes. They want you out. The bluntness surprised me. What makes you say that? Because I'm not deaf. I hear conversations through walls. Aunt Kara thinks you're holding Mom back. Mom thinks you're too cautious. They talk about it like it's obvious, like everyone can see it except you. She picked at a loose thread on her pajama sleeve. They think you'll just agree because you always agree to family stuff. I don't always agree. You never disagree out loud, which is basically the same thing. She wasn't wrong. I'd spent years maintaining peace, choosing battles carefully, prioritizing harmony over confrontation. It had seemed like maturity. Now it looked like weakness. Sometimes disagreement requires preparation, I said. Speaking up without leverage just makes noise. Do you have leverage? I might. Good. She stood up. Because people thinking you do nothing is embarrassing, and people thinking you'll just let them push you around is worse. She left before I could respond. I sat in the garage, surrounded by contract files and maintenance records, my daughter's words echoing. People thinking you do nothing. People thinking you'll just let them push you around. The assumption of compliance had become my reputation, not only with Hazel and Kara, but with Nina, extended family, even clients who saw me as competent but unremarkable. The quiet professional who kept things running and never made waves, useful, reliable, dismissible. Monday evening would change that. But before then, one more piece had to be secured. Sunday afternoon, I drove to the main yard. Officially closed, but I had keys and clearance. The silence was total. No engines, no voices, just wind and the hum of security lights. I went to the archive room, a converted storage space lined with filing cabinets. 6 years of contracts, leases, insurance policies. The paper trail of everything we'd built. I pulled 3 files, Fletcher Transport, Morrison Delivery Systems, Cascade Logistics. Our 3 largest clients, 70% of revenue. Each contract contained identical language on operational continuity and management authorization. I photographed every page, carefully and clearly, then returned the files and locked the room. In the main office, I logged into the operational email system, separate from the general account, reserved for client and vendor communication. I drafted 3 nearly identical messages, customized for each client, wanted to confirm upcoming renewal discussions and ensure documentation is current. I'm aware of some internal changes being considered and want to make sure continuity of service remains our shared priority. Could we schedule a brief call this week to review terms and address any questions? Appreciate your partnership. Professional, non-alarmist, signaling change without panic. I scheduled them for Monday at 8 a.m. At home, I finished preparing. Documents organized, questions sequenced, a timeline mapping their escalation against my responses. No emotion, just facts. Hazel was out, dinner with friends. Nina was upstairs. I made tea and sat in the quiet kitchen, reviewing my approach. The goal wasn't confrontation. It was clarification. They believed they had authority to restructure. I needed to show why that belief was wrong, preferably after they committed publicly to it. Martin had suggested letting them make the first move. The more visible their claim, the cleaner the correction. Tomorrow night, they'd formalize their proposal. I'd ask questions, push for specifics, let them lock themselves into positions they thought were secure. Then the week would unfold, clients would respond, vendors would confirm relationships, the bank would verify authorization protocols, the architecture would reveal itself. Hazel came home around 9, cheeks flushed from wine. She found me still in the kitchen. "You're up late," she said. Too much on my mind. "About tomorrow?" "Among other things." She leaned against the counter. "I need you to come in with an open mind. Kara's proposal is solid, but it only works if you're willing to let go of control." "I don't have control. I have operational responsibility." Semantics. "Legal distinctions?" Her expression hardened. "You hide behind technical language instead of engaging with substance. We're trying to build something bigger. Contracts are what protect everyone involved, including you. Or they're how you avoid change." We stood there, 20 years of marriage distilled into a single divide. She saw contracts as obstacles. I saw them as structure. The gap wasn't bridgeable. "I'll listen tomorrow," I said, "and I'll ask hard questions. That's diligence, not sabotage. Just don't undermine this before you hear it." She went upstairs without saying goodnight. I stayed in the kitchen, watching the clock edge toward Monday. My phone lay on the table, emails queued in the outbox. Everything was aligned, systems in place, leverage documented. They thought tomorrow was when they'd corner me. Tomorrow was when they'd learn there was no corner at all. Monday evening arrived with the heavy stillness that precedes storms. Kara and Evan showed up at 6:30 carrying folders and confidence. Hazel had set up the dining room like a boardroom, laptop open, notepad ready, water glasses positioned precisely. "Orion, thanks for making time." Kara's smile was professional, controlled. "Let's get started. Evan and I have prepared a comprehensive proposal." We sat. Evan pulled up a presentation on the laptop. Slick graphics, projected revenue curves, market analysis. Kara walked through it systematically. Current business model generates stable but limited returns. Annual revenue has plateaued at approximately the same level for 3 years. Meanwhile, the primary asset, the yard property, sits underutilized. We've secured preliminary interest from a development group willing to pay $2.3 million for the land and provide relocation assistance for operational transition. Relocation to where? I asked. A smaller facility in the industrial park. Lower lease costs, adequate space for vehicle maintenance. Clients can relocate their operations accordingly. Have you discussed relocation with any clients? We don't need to at this stage. That's operational detail. Operational detail that determines whether they'll accept the transition. Kara waved this aside. Clients follow service quality. You maintain quality. Everyone adjusts. I made a note. Continue. Evan advanced the slides. Financial projections showed the $2.3 million being reinvested into something. The details were vague. Diversified portfolio. Strategic growth opportunities. Partnership ventures. What specifically would we invest in? I asked. That's what strategic oversight determines, Kara said. The point is moving from linear operational revenue to compound returns through intelligent capital deployment. Who manages this deployment? I would. That's my expertise. And my role. You'd continue managing vehicle operations during the transition period. Once we've successfully redeveloped and reinvested, we can evaluate whether ongoing fleet management makes sense or whether those resources should be redirected. There it was, buried in professional language. They'd eliminate my position entirely once they'd extracted the asset value. What about vendor relationships? I asked. Maintenance contracts, parts suppliers, fuel distributors. Those relationships are built on specific operational partnerships. All transferable, Evan said. Business relationships follow business interests. Do they? Have you verified that with our vendors? Kara's patience was thinning. Orion, you're fixating on minutia. The big picture is clear. We leverage underutilized assets for significantly higher returns. The operational details work themselves out. Unless they don't, then what? Then we adjust. That's what strategic management does. Hazel had been quiet. Now she spoke. Orion, what exactly is your objection? Kara's offering to take on risk and complexity you're not equipped to handle. You'd still have a role during transition, and financially we'd all benefit enormously. My objection is that I don't think the transition works the way you're describing. Client contracts have continuity provisions. Vendor agreements require operational authorization. The property lease has specific execution requirements. Those aren't minutia. They're structural elements. Which we'll address as needed, Kara said dismissively. You're catastrophizing obstacles that don't exist. I pulled out my folder. Then let's clarify. Here's the Fletcher contract. Clause 7 specifies that service obligations vest with the fleet operations manager, that's me, and that contract performance is tied to operational continuity, not ownership structure. If we relocate operations, Fletcher has to consent. If they don't, they can follow the operational manager elsewhere. Kara took the document, skimmed it, frowned. That's just standard boilerplate. It's in all 3 major client contracts. Morrison and Cascade have identical language. I checked. So we get their consent. You said yourself, clients follow service quality. Maybe, but they're risk-averse. Logistics companies hate disruption. The moment we propose relocating, they'll ask questions about continuity, capacity, transition planning. Those questions need good answers. Which we'll provide. Based on what? Have you surveyed alternative facilities? Confirmed maintenance capacity? Calculated downtime during transition? Silence. Evan glanced at Kara. She'd been operating on assumption, not detailed planning. Those details get worked out during execution, Kara said. The strategic decision comes first. Not in logistics. In logistics, execution capacity determines strategy. Hazel intervened. You're being deliberately difficult. Kara's offering valuable expertise. I'm asking operational questions. If the proposal works, these questions have answers. I pulled out another document. Here's the property lease. Amendment 3, signed 2 years ago when we expanded the maintenance bay. Requires fleet operations manager's signature for any lease modifications, including termination. The landlord wanted operational stability, so execution authority was assigned specifically. Kara's expression shifted. Not quite concern, but recognition that the landscape was more complex than she'd assumed. We can negotiate with the landlord, she said. Can you? Without my signature, you can't terminate the lease. Which means you can't sell the property. which means the development deal can't close. Then you sign. Why would I? If I sign away the lease, I lose operational base. If clients won't relocate, I lose client relationships. I'd be eliminating my own position with no benefit. You'd receive a settlement, a fair division of proceeds. Determined how? You're proposing to sell an asset I control access to, then reinvest proceeds in ventures I have no oversight of. I'd be trading definite operational authority for theoretical financial returns managed by someone else. The room went quiet. Hazel was staring at me like I'd revealed a secret language she didn't speak. Evan was recalculating. Kara was realizing the corner she'd planned didn't exist. What exactly are you saying? Hazel asked slowly. I'm saying the proposal assumes authority you don't have. You own the business entity, but the clients contract with me, the vendors work with me, and the property lease requires my authorization. You can't restructure without my cooperation, and cooperation requires better answers than I'm hearing. Kara stood abruptly. This is exactly the obstructionist behavior I warned about. You're hiding behind legal technicalities because you're afraid of change. I'm identifying structural realities because ignoring them leads to failure. We're offering you a path to real wealth. You're offering me unemployment with extra steps. Then what do you want? Hazel's voice cracked. To keep everything exactly as it is forever? To trap us in your cautious, limited vision? I want to understand how this transition works without destroying what we've built. If you can't explain that, maybe the proposal isn't as solid as you think. Kara began gathering her materials. I'm not going to be lectured about operations by someone who can't see past daily logistics. The development opportunity is real. The timeline is real. If you can't get on board, we'll move forward without you. How? She stopped. Seriously, I said. How do you proceed without operational authority? You file paperwork, announce intentions. Clients will ask me if service continues. Vendors will ask about payment authorization. The bank will ask who controls the accounts. What do I tell them? You tell them you're cooperating with your wife's decisions. Based on what? A proposal with no execution plan? They won't risk their operations on that. Hazel stood. I'm your wife. Doesn't that count? Of course. But marriage doesn't override contract law. These protections exist to keep businesses stable during disputes. We're not disputing. We're trying to grow. By removing my authority, that's a dispute. Evan finally spoke. Maybe we should revisit the approach. Orion's raising valid points about transition. He's stalling, Kara cut in. He wants leverage for a better settlement. I don't want a settlement. I want my job and the relationships I built. If your plan destroys those, I oppose it. Kara looked at Hazel. Something shifted. Frustration, recalculation. We'll revisit this, Kara said tightly. After you've had time to think about what's really at stake. They left. Hazel stayed behind, laptop open on a slide titled Strategic Value Realization. You humiliated her, she said. I asked questions. You made her look unprepared. She was unprepared. The proposal relies on assumptions that don't survive scrutiny. Or you just won't trust anyone else's vision. She closed the laptop and went upstairs. I remained at the table, folders spread out, the confrontation still hanging in the room. My phone buzzed. An email from Fletcher Transport. Got your message. Happy to discuss renewal terms Thursday morning. Also hearing rumors about changes to your operation. Want to confirm service isn't affected. Rumors already circulating. I replied, Thursday works, no disruptions. Service continuity remains my priority. Similar messages followed from Morrison and Cascade, all 3 clients concerned, all requesting meetings. Kara had created instability without realizing it. Now I'd have to steady relationships while deciding what came next. But one thing was clear. The corner they planned to trap me in didn't exist. The leverage they assumed they had was imaginary, and now they knew it. The only question left was what they'd do with that realization. Tuesday morning, the consequences began to surface. I arrived at the Fletcher yard at 7 to find their operations manager, Thomas Hendricks, waiting beside my truck. Need to talk, he said. We went to his office. Thomas was former military, ran his operation with precision, and had little tolerance for uncertainty. I got a call yesterday, he said. Someone claiming to represent your company ownership. Kara. She said there might be changes to service structure and wanted to introduce herself as strategic oversight. I told her we deal with you. She didn't expect that. What exactly did she say? That the business was restructuring, possibly relocating operations. I asked if you were still fleet operations manager. She said that was under review, and so I'm asking you directly, are you still our operational contact? Yes. And is service relocating? not without client consent, which I'm not proposing. Tomas studied me. So, what's happening? Family members are exploring development options that would require operational changes. I'm not supporting them. Clients won't be disrupted. Good, he said, because uncertainty means we look for alternatives. Fletcher can't afford disruptions. Understood. Continuity is my priority. Make sure it stays that way, he stood. Thursday still works for renewal. Similar conversations followed with Morrison and Cascade. All 3 clients expressed concern. All 3 reaffirmed they contracted with me, not an abstract ownership structure. All 3 made clear they'd follow me if I left. Kara had approached them without understanding that in logistics, loyalty followed relationships, not letterhead. Wednesday afternoon, Martin Ryle called. Had an interesting conversation, he said. Hazel's attorney reached out. She's exploring options to remove you from operational authority. She hired her own lawyer? Yes, Danielle Pierce, corporate specialist. Her position is that ownership overrides operational control. And yours? That the contracts say otherwise. She didn't like that. My sense is they're preparing to escalate legally. Can they win? Unlikely, but they can create noise and confusion. The question is whether that hurts you or everyone. What do you recommend? Clarify authority publicly before they misrepresent it. Clients are already uneasy. Get ahead of it. How public? Industry setting. Somewhere your professional circle hears it directly from you. I thought for a moment. There's a regional logistics summit next week. I usually attend, not present. What if I took a slot? Perfect. Industry audience. Recorded. Professional context. That feels aggressive. So is hiring an attorney to strip your authority without warning. You're responding to escalation. He was right. This had moved beyond family pressure into legal maneuvering. I'll register for a presentation, I said. That evening, I drafted talking points. No emotion, no accusations. Just clear language about operational structure, client relationships, and continuity. Facts. On record. In front of people who mattered. Hazel was barely speaking to me. We moved through the house in parallel tracks. Nina noticed, but said nothing, retreating to her room. Thursday morning, I met with Thomas at Fletcher. We reviewed renewal terms, confirmed pricing, discussed maintenance protocols. Business as usual. Heard you're presenting at the summit next week, he mentioned. About operational frameworks? Standard industry topic. Good. People need reminding that operations aren't interchangeable. Friday, I received formal notice from Hazel's attorney. A letter outlining her position. As primary owner, she had authority to restructure management and redirect business strategy. My cooperation was expected. Resistance would be addressed through appropriate legal channels. The language was threatening without being specific, designed to intimidate. I forwarded it to Martin. He responded within an hour. Standard pressure tactic. Ignore and proceed with summit presentation. Saturday, Kara showed up unannounced. I was in the garage when she walked in. We need to talk. Alone. About? About the fact that you're sabotaging your own family. You're choosing ego over everyone's well-being. I'm choosing operational stability over vague proposals. It's not vague. You just refuse to see the vision. Vision without execution is fantasy. Show me how your proposal works without destroying client relationships, and I'll reconsider. She stepped closer. Here's what's really happening, Orion. You're scared. Scared that without this job, you're nobody, so you're clinging to authority that should have transitioned years ago. If authority should have transitioned, why didn't it? Why are the contracts written the way they're written? Because you manipulated legal structures to protect yourself? I protected continuity. That happens to benefit me. You're delusional, and you're going to lose everything, all because you can't admit you're in over your head. Then why are you still trying to convince me? If I'm powerless, why negotiate? She didn't have an answer. After a moment, she said, The summit presentation, we know you registered. Cancel it. Don't make this public. It's an industry event. Operations managers present at industry events. You know exactly what you're doing. You're trying to embarrass Hazel, undermine the restructuring. I'm clarifying operational realities for clients who are asking questions. Questions you created by contacting them without authorization. I don't need authorization. I'm family. You're not signatory to their contracts. That distinction matters. Kara's expression hardened. You're making a serious mistake. When this is over, you'll have nothing. No business, no family, no respect. Just your precious contracts and empty authority. We'll see. She left without another word. Sunday, I refined the presentation, confirmed the time slot. Notified clients I'd be speaking about operational continuity frameworks. All 3 confirmed attendance. Monday morning, Hazel finally confronted me directly. Kara says you're presenting at the summit, that you're planning to publicly undermine us. I'm presenting about operational structures, standard industry topic, with our clients in the audience, while we're trying to restructure. That's not coincidence, that's sabotage. If the restructuring is solid, my presentation won't affect it. If it's not solid, clients deserve to understand why. This is our marriage, Orion. Our family. You're treating it like a business dispute. You made it a business dispute when you hired an attorney and sent legal threats. Because you won't cooperate. I won't surrender authority without understanding consequences. Those aren't the same thing. She stared at me, and something in her expression shifted. Not anger anymore. Something colder. Recognition, maybe. That the person she'd been married to for 20 years wasn't who she'd assumed. After the summit, don't come home, she said quietly. I want you out. Understood. She left the room. I sat in the quiet house, the weight of 20 years collapsing into this moment. Nina was at a friend's house. Probably better that way. I packed a bag, essentials only. Everything else could wait. The summit was Wednesday. 3 days to prepare for the conversation that would end one version of my life and clarify another. The Regional Logistics Summit took place at the Riverside Conference Center, a practical venue for industry events. About 200 attendees, operations managers, vendor reps, logistics coordinators, people who understood the gap between strategy and execution. I arrived early Wednesday morning. My slot was at 2 p.m., 45 minutes titled Operational Continuity and Fleet Management, Contract Structures and Authority Frameworks. A dry title, intentional, nothing inflammatory, nothing to signal subtext to anyone not involved. Tomas from Fletcher caught me during the morning break. Looking forward to your talk. Timely, given the instability lately. That's the point. Clarity. Morrison's procurement director joined us. Good you're covering continuity. We've been hearing mixed signals about your operation. By lunch, I knew all 3 major clients would be in the room. Several vendors, too. Martin Ryle sat in the back, notebook open. What I didn't expect was Hazel and Kara walking in at 1:50. They took seats in the middle rows, business attire standing out. Evan sat with them, visibly tense. Kara looked cold. At exactly 2, the moderator introduced me. Orion Vanton, a fleet operations manager with 15 years in logistics coordination. I stepped to the podium. Thank you. Today, I want to talk about a subject that doesn't get enough attention. The difference between ownership and operational authority and why that distinction protects everyone. The first slide showed a simple diagram, ownership structure versus operational execution. People assume these are the same. They're not. Ownership holds financial stake. Operations executes contracts, manages vendors, and maintains service. When they align, things run smoothly. When they don't, clarity matters. I walked through generalized examples. Ownership changes, operations staying constant, contracts written to protect continuity. Clients don't care who owns the company. They care who answers the phone at 5 a.m. when a truck breaks down. Who knows their routes, their drivers, their constraints. That's who the contract protects. I displayed real contract language, continuity clauses, authority designations, transfer conditions. Practically, this means ownership can't restructure operations unilaterally. Operational cooperation isn't courtesy, it's contractual. Clients and vendors demand it because continuity outweighs corporate preference. Heads nodded. This was familiar territory. So what happens when ownership and operations disagree? When ownership wants change that operations believes will disrupt service? I paused, meeting eyes around the room. Thomas, Morrison, Cascade, then Kara. In these structures, operations doesn't work for ownership. Operations works for clients. The contracts say so, which means if proposed changes threaten continuity, operations not only can resist, they're obligated to. The room was silent now. People were connecting the dots. I'm telling you this because some of you have received communications recently suggesting changes to operational structures you work with. You've asked questions about continuity, about whether your service will be affected. The answer is this. Operational authority doesn't change unless the person holding that authority agrees. Period. I advanced to the next slide, a list of questions clients should ask when facing operational uncertainty. Who holds contract execution authority? Who manages vendor relationships? Who has lease authorization? These aren't abstract questions. They determine whether proposed changes are actually possible or just aspirational. Kara was staring at me. Hazel looked stricken. In my specific case, I let that phrase hang for a moment. I hold operational authority for 3 major client contracts, multiple vendor agreements, and property lease execution. Those authorities were designated specifically to protect continuity. They can't be transferred without my signature, which means any proposed restructuring requires my cooperation, not my compliance. Tomas was nodding. So were others. Why am I telling you this publicly? Because clarity protects everyone. Clients need to know their service is secure. Vendors need to know who authorizes payments. Ownership needs to understand what authority they actually have. Ambiguity helps nobody. I pulled up the final slide. Contact information, contract review resources, industry standards for continuity protection. If you're facing similar situations, get clear on authority structures before anything else. Review your contracts, understand who controls what, protect continuity first, negotiate everything else second. I stepped back from the podium. Questions? The first hand up was Morrison's director. If operational authority is contractually designated, can ownership challenge that in court? They can try, but courts generally enforce executed contracts. If clients signed agreements specifying operational authority, challenging that becomes expensive litigation with uncertain outcomes. Cascade's representative. What if ownership tries to force restructuring anyway? Clients have continuity provisions. If service is disrupted, they can terminate and follow operational authority elsewhere. Most clients would rather avoid that complexity, which gives operational managers significant leverage. A vendor I didn't recognize. This seems like operational authority can hold ownership hostage. Only if ownership pursues changes that threaten continuity. If changes are genuinely beneficial and properly planned, operational authority would cooperate. These protections exist for situations where ownership prioritizes financial extraction over service stability. More questions followed. 15 minutes of detailed discussion about contract structures, authority frameworks, client protection mechanisms. Kara and Hazel had left before the Q&A finished. Tomas found me in the hallway after. That was more pointed than standard industry presentation. Needed to be clear. Message received. Fletcher's position is unchanged. We work with you, not theoretical restructured entities. Morrison and Cascade representatives confirmed the same. Martin appeared at my elbow. Well executed. You established authority publicly, documented client support, and created a record. What happens next? They recalculate. The development deal is effectively terminated. Can't sell property you can't access, can't restructure operations you don't control. I felt something release in my chest. Not victory exactly. More like the end of uncertainty. I drove to a hotel near the yard, extended stay facility, unpacked my single bag and sat on the bed. My phone buzzed. Text from Nina. Mom's crying. Aunt Kara's yelling. What happened? I replied. Clarified some business realities. Nothing that affects you directly. I'm staying in a hotel for a few days. We can talk whenever you want. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, okay. But the cornerstone of Kara's plan had collapsed. The development deal required property access I controlled. The restructuring required client cooperation they wouldn't provide. They'd cornered themselves trying to corner me. Tomorrow would bring fallout. But the fundamental question was answered. Authority came from contracts and relationships, not ownership and assumptions. And I held the contracts. Thursday morning brought a message from Hazel's attorney. Brief, professional, requesting a meeting to discuss resolution options. They'd realized the restructuring was impossible and wanted to negotiate exit terms. I forwarded it to Martin. He called within minutes. They're backing down. Pierce doesn't pursue losing strategies. She's looked at the contracts, talked to clients. Now she wants damage control. The afternoon brought a different message. Nina asking if we could meet for coffee. I found her at a place near her school, tucked into a corner booth with untouched homework. She looked tired. Mom's not handling this well, she said. Aunt Kara keeps saying you sabotaged everything. I clarified authority structures that were already in place. That felt like sabotage because they'd assumed authority they didn't have. Mom says you humiliated her publicly. I presented at an industry conference about operational continuity. Clients needed clarity. Nina picked at her coffee cup. So now what? You and Mom separate, everything falls apart. The business doesn't fall apart. It continues operating exactly as it has been. Your mom and I, that's more complicated. Do you still love her? The question caught me off guard. 20 years of partnership. now revealed as conditional. She'd aligned against me the moment Kara suggested greater profit. I love who she was, I said carefully. I don't know who she is now. Nina nodded slowly. Aunt Kara changed her, made her think stability was failure. We talked for another hour, not about business or conflict, just normal conversation. School stress, college planning, friend drama. When I dropped her back, she paused before getting out. Dad, don't let them make you think you did something wrong. You didn't. You just stopped letting them treat you like you were invisible. She closed the door before I could respond. Friday, Martin arranged a preliminary meeting with Danielle Pierce. Neutral location, just legal representatives discussing framework. Pierce was sharp and clearly frustrated with her clients. Mr. Vanton, my clients pursued restructuring based on incomplete understanding. That was their error. However, continuing current structure benefits nobody. We need exit strategy. What are you proposing? Business entity remains under Mrs. Vanton's ownership. Operational authority transfers to independent entity under your control. Clients contract with your new entity. Mrs. Vanton receives ongoing royalty from operational revenue. Percentage negotiable. For how long? 5 years, declining scale. Year 1, 8% of gross revenue. Year 5, 2%. Martin made notes. Counter proposal. 7% declining to 1% over 5 years. Mr. Vanton assumes all lease obligations. Clean transfer of vendor contracts with no ongoing approval requirements. Mrs. Vanton has no operational input. Pierce nodded. I can work with that. We left with framework established. The war was effectively over. That evening my phone rang. Hazel. Can we talk? Her voice was smaller than I'd heard it in years. About? About everything. About what I didn't see. Long silence. Then, I'm sorry. I let Kara convince me you were the problem. I didn't realize she was wrong until Wednesday, understanding that the authority I thought I had never existed. It existed, just not the way you assumed. I should have asked, should have verified. Is there any way to fix this? I thought about that honestly. 20 years. Nina. The genuine partnership before it became conditional. I don't know, I said. Trust is hard to rebuild. The settlement Pierce proposed. I'm going to accept it. You should have clear authority. Thank you. We talked for a few more minutes. Careful, tentative, not reconciliation, but maybe the first step towards something less broken. Monday, I'd start the formal transition. New business entity, transferred contracts, updated vendor agreements. But tonight, I just sat in the quiet hotel room and let myself feel the weight of 20 years ending and something new beginning. The Riverside Conference Center hosted one final session Friday afternoon, a vendor coordination meeting where suppliers and operations managers discussed upcoming year planning. Optional attendance, but most major players showed up. I hadn't planned to go. But Martin called Thursday evening. Kara's planning to attend the vendor meeting. She's telling people she's taking over operational coordination. She's making one final push to claim authority before the settlement formalizes. I'll be there, I said. Friday afternoon, the vendor meeting room was set up conference style. Round tables, 40 people, casual but professional atmosphere, suppliers I'd worked with for years. Kara arrived 15 minutes late deliberately, made an entrance, sat at the front table like she belonged there. The coordinator, Patricia Frost, opened the meeting. Welcome, everyone. Today we're reviewing vendor coordination protocols for the coming year. Kara raised her hand. Before we start, I want to introduce myself. Kara Holt. I'll be handling strategic oversight for Vanton Fleet operations moving forward. Silence. People glanced at me. I was sitting 3 tables back. Patricia looked confused. I wasn't aware of management changes. Orion? Kara isn't involved in operational management, I said calmly. No changes to vendor coordination. Kara's smile didn't waver. There's been some miscommunication. The ownership structure is evolving. I'm representing those ownership interests. One of the maintenance contractors, Sam Porter, spoke up. With respect, we don't contract with ownership interests. We contract with fleet operations. That's Orion. Understood, Kara said smoothly. But as operations evolve, coordination needs proper strategic channels? What strategic channels? Another vendor. We submit invoices, they get approved, we get paid. Orion handles process. Kara was losing the room. I appreciate your existing relationships, but professional operations require oversight. We have oversight, Sam interrupted, from the operations manager. Who's sitting right there? People were looking at Kara now with confusion turning to annoyance. Patricia tried to smooth things over. Perhaps this is a conversation for leadership to resolve privately. It's already resolved, I said, standing. Kara isn't authorized for vendor coordination. She has no signature authority, no approval capability, and no operational role. This is the second time this week she's attempted to claim authority she doesn't have. Kara's composure cracked. You can't just dismiss me. I'm not dismissing you. I'm clarifying reality. You have no operational authority. You never did. The business owner has no operational authority either. That authority is contractually designated to me. Clients confirmed this Wednesday. Vendors are confirming it now. This is exactly the ego-driven obstruction. She started. No, I said quietly. This is contract law. You proposed restructuring that would eliminate my authority. I demonstrated why that was impossible. You've now attempted twice to claim authority through assertion. It hasn't worked either time. Sam nodded. Orion's right. We're not changing vendor coordination based on someone claiming oversight. Others murmured agreement. The room had shifted completely. Kara was isolated, her play collapsing in front of professional witnesses. She stood abruptly. Fine. When it fails, because you couldn't adapt? It's been running successfully for 15 years, I interrupted. It runs because operational authority is clear, relationships are maintained, and systems are respected. Kara stared at me. Something in her expression finally shifted. Recognition that she'd miscalculated fundamentally. She'd treated this like a property deal where confidence could override structure. But operations didn't work that way. She left without another word. Patricia cleared her throat. Well, shall we proceed with the actual agenda? The meeting continued normally. Vendor coordination protocols, payment schedules, the routine business that kept everything functioning. Afterward, several vendors approached me directly. Just to confirm, Sam said, no changes to approval authority? None. If anyone else claims authority, verify with me directly. Similar confirmations from others. The vendor network was locked. Kara had attempted her final play and been rejected unanimously. They'd tried to corner me quietly, assumed I'd fold without resistance. Believed authority came from ownership and confidence rather than contracts and competence. They were wrong.